people is the voice of God. The tables are turning, your eyes are opening. Welcome to the revolution.
People crying out for justice. Some of them crying out for freedom.
Want freedom.
Everybody crying out for democracy. Now it's time to take a stand, yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution, the people's revolution. This is the revolution.
Let's unite and stand for something.
This is the revolution, the people's revolution. This is the revolution. I wanna hear everybody sing. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters, let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy, and this revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people's revolution.
Come on, people.
Come on.
Come on, people.
Let's move.
Come on, people.
Come on.
Come on, come on, come on, come on. People crying out for justice. Some of them crying out for freedom. Everybody crying out for democracy. Now it's time to take a stand, yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution, the people's revolution. This is the revolution.
Let's unite and stand for something.
This is the revolution, the people's revolution. This is the revolution. I wanna hear everybody sing. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters, let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy, and this revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people's revolution.
Come on, people. Come on, people. Come on, people. Come on, come on, come on, come on, people. Come on, people. Come on, people. Come on, come on, come on, come on.
The people's revolution.
This is a peaceful people's revolution, and it has only just begun. is a revolution against a galloping dictatorship. This is a revolution against joblessness and hopelessness. This is a revolution against property tax. Our revolution now continues as a people's revolution, and it has just begun. Our revolution continues as a peaceful people's revolution, and it has only just begun. Join us in this people's revolution.
The voice of the people is the voice of God. The tables are turning, your eyes are opening. Welcome to the revolution. People crying out for justice.
Some of them crying out for freedom.
Want freedom. Everybody crying out for democracy.
Now it's time to take a stand, yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution. The people's revolution. This is the revolution.
Let's unite and stand for something.
This is the revolution. The people's revolution. This is the revolution. I wanna hear everybody sing. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Man and woman sing freedom. Everybody sing freedom. Everybody sing. As we move in this people's revolution, my brothers and sisters, let's all walk together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy, and this revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people's revolution.
Come on, people.
Come on,
Come on, people.
let's move.
Come on, people.
Come on,
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
people crying out for justice.
Some of them crying out for freedom.
Everybody crying out for democracy.
Now it's time to take a stand, yeah.
Come on! Cause this is the revolution. The people's revolution. This is the revolution.
Let's unite and stand for something.
This is the revolution. The people's revolution. This is the revolution.
Forged from the love of liberty in the fires of hope and prayer, with boundless faith in our destiny, we solemnly declare, side by side we stand, highlands of the blue Caribbean Sea, this our native land, we pledge our lives to thee. Here every creed and race find an equal place, and may God nation. Hear every creed and race find an equal place. And may God bless all nations.
Almighty God, most beneficial and merciful, Creator of the universe and embodiment of divine wisdom and light, we come before you with thanksgiving and praise. May your will be done in our nation as it is in the heavens. Please bless our political leader, party officials, activists, and all the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Give us the grace to always see good, be good, and do good, and the courage to serve the people. Protect us as we stand against injustice and iniquity, and inspire our endeavors to find the right solutions to the problems that are affecting our fellow citizens. Grant that we may always work together with humility and respect for the greater happiness of all and the honor and glory of our country. Amen. From across the nation, this is the United National Congress People's Revolution. Welcome to our virtual report.
Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, people. Come on, people. Come on, people. Come on, come on, come on, come on.
The People's Revolution.
Your office come with criticism. Your office come with scrutiny. Your office come with that. You have to be able to take that and function. Let the soldier, let the military in you kick in.
In the image of the United National Congress, community activist Victor Roberts.
Pleasant good night to the Honorable Leader of the United National Congress, NATEX members, executive. Pleasant good night to all. Today, ladies and gentlemen, as we deal with the subject matter, democracy, first, let me just introduce to you where your democracy lies, right inside here. So let me close it. Ladies and gentlemen, today as we look at democracy, we look at the process of democracy. When we understand what is democracy, ladies and gentlemen, it is a process that you, the citizens, actively participate in order to have your voice heard in this country. And how do you do that? You do that, ladies and gentlemen, through the electoral process. Under this process, ladies and gentlemen, you, by voting, select a representative to represent you in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. When that individual goes to the Parliament, you expect that individual to speak on your behalf, to lobby on your behalf, to bring to the attention of the government the problems that you face. But today, ladies and gentlemen, under Keith Rowley and the PNM government, democracy now lies in the coffin. Because you cannot tell me the first step to democracy is our constitution. Our constitution set out the framework, the rules and guidelines whereby you as individuals will do that selection process. And today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you, for that process to be completed, that process must be free and fair. And if we are talking about democracy, how come today we have a family of a former minister of this government sitting in the hem of the election process, which we call the EBC? How could democracy prevail when you have such of bias lying within the EBC? What democracy we speaking about? Added to that, ladies and gentlemen, when we speak about democracy, we will expect that our members in the opposition, who we have selected to speak on our behalf in the parliament, we would expect that they would be given the opportunity to represent us. But you see, under the Keith Rowley administration, it is one democracy for the PNM and no democracy for the UNC. I am saying that the time has come that you as the UNC members have to stand up and demand democracy in our country. The time for playing over, the time for games over. As a result of failed democracy in our country, we now have the Prime Minister interfering in every independent institution, contaminating it with the PNM ideology. So today we doesn't have a commissioner of police. Added to that, ladies and gentlemen, our president of Trinidad and Tobago, we elect that president through the electoral college, which will entail the opposition, the independent senators, the PNM senators, and members of parliament. But after we have done that process, for democracy to prevail, the president, according to the constitution, she is now charged with a responsibility to protect, to keep the democracy of this country intact. When we have a president who allows herself to be contaminated by the political directorate, whether they fret, they jam, they lie, whatever, when we allow them to contaminate themselves, I don't know if it is because of the Bishop Tea Party, I don't know. But when we allow that, ladies and gentlemen, and the president allow the political directorate to step inside the privacy of the president office and erode our democracy, I am saying that we must call for the president to go. I don't know what is wrong with us in this country, that we believe that this country is PNM country. We believe that Keith Rowley could do what he wants with our democracy, and that is okay. We are saying that we have to stand to defend our democracy. Why? Ladies and gentlemen, when you allow a government to erode your democracy, and you allow that government to escape, how could you then fix it going forward? Don't you know that the next government will continue within the same trend, and the next government, and the next government, and before you know it, you know what is happening? We will be faced with what we're facing with right now. A dictator leading the country. Ladies, gentlemen, let me tell you something today. You see this box? This box symbolizes many things. This box symbolizes the economy. This box symbolizes the health sector. This box symbolizes the government policies. And this box, by you failing to act, will also symbolize you. This is what this box will symbolize. We had to stand up and understand that this country belongs to all of us. We cannot watch UNC and PNM. We cannot watch African and Indian. We have to watch people. We have to watch the future of this country. We have to watch the future of the children. That is what we need to stand for. And that is what I am calling you to do. To stand to defend this. To stand to defend your democracy. We have the abuse of power from the police come right back. We have the abuse of power from the government. We have a merit list that went through the process. People voted on it. All the scientific testing that was done. It left the Police Service Commission and went to the President House, only to be taken from there and sent to the Parliament for the Parliament to do their job. What we have are infringement of our democracy, and the people in this country take that as good coffee. Let me tell you something. Law Association and Judiciary and all earlier, who Rowley could flip when he want, who they could shove around to deal with any case that they want to deal with. Let me tell you something today. I want you to understand, today is for me, but tomorrow will very well be for you. Your turn is coming. You know why? Because this government have no mercy. This government do not care about law and order, and this government does not care about your constitutional rights. This. No care. So to the end of it all, you as people in this country, you as the citizens of this country, you have a job to do. And the job you need to do in this country is to protect our democracy. Protect this for the future of your children. Protect this for the future of your grandchildren. Protect this for your unborn babies. If you doesn't protect this, ladies and gentlemen, we have no country. How could we allow the PNM to infringe on every constitutional rights that we have? That's something that people die and sweat for, something that people put together, something that the world recognize us for because of our democratic process. And today, because of an arrogant prime minister, an incompetent prime minister, a prime minister who have no love in his heart for you the people, a prime minister who don't care about law and order, a prime minister who only care about his friends and financiers, a prime minister who only cares about himself. How come we allow that? How come we are allowing this, ladies and gentlemen? People of Trinidad and Tobago, this is no longer about a color of a shirt. This is no longer about the texture of your head. This is about us. This is about the future of us. This is what we are calling you to stand and defend. The honorable political leader embarked on the October Revolution. And the purpose of the October Revolution is to ensure that democracy be restored in our country. How many of you will stand with us? How many of you will stand together? How many of you, where are the stakeholders? Where are those archbishops who speak in 2010 and 15? Where are the trade unions? Where are all those councils? Where are you? You know, it reminds me of a song. It have a song we sing when we were in Sunday school. Adam in the garden hiding. The time for you to stop hiding now. We are asking you, ladies and gentlemen, to stand together with us on the 12th of December. The place is the water park in Debe. Let us stand together and send a collective message to this administration that we, the citizens of this country, we had enough. It is time to defend our democracy. God bless you. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
If you are one of those 100,000 persons who have lost your job under this government, you know the pain of trying to figure out where your next meal is coming from, the frustration of banks breathing down your neck, the trauma of finding money to pay for basic necessities.
in the image of the United National Congress, the Member of Parliament for Uruput West, Dave Tanku.
Political leader of the United National Congress, the Honorable Kamala Prasad Bisesa, Senior Counsel, other concerned patriots of Trinidad and Tobago, my brothers and sisters all, a good night. Between the time you went to sleep last night and the time you woke up this morning, at least 8 persons died from COVID and COVID-19 related illnesses. For the month of November alone, we have already had over 400 deaths and over 13,000 new infections, and the month is not even finished yet. Every hour of every day, someone in this country is affected and infected. Someone dies from COVID-19. Every hour of every day, someone loses a mother, their father, their children, their sibling, or a friend permanently. Every home has been impacted. Every family, every community throughout this country has been touched by this icy hand of death. This government's first line of defense is their daily public lecture sessions that nobody listens to. Dr. Mariam Abdul Richards complains daily about how stretched the resources of the state are, while she is raking in tens of thousands of dollars from multiple state board appointments. That is a slap in the face for the thousands of frontline workers, including doctors, nurses, technicians, and support staff, who are the ones who are living the horror story, forced to work for long hours in deplorable conditions, compromised by equipment shortages and without sufficient personal protective equipment, every day putting their lives at tremendous risk. Dr. Abdul Richards, in addition to being the principal medical officer at the Ministry of Health, is also a director at NIPDEC, and she serves on multiple cabinet-appointed interministerial committees and was also most recently appointed to the board of Angostura. Now, I heard that there's a Dr. Miriam Abdul Richards who is also an executive member of the National Muslim Women's Association of Trinidad and Tobago. But that can't be the same person, because that would point to a totally different moral compass and would be disrespectful in the highest. I believe the most important of all of these seemingly favored appointments, and the most critical at this time, is Dr. Abdul Richards' job as Principal Medical Officer at the Ministry of Health, with responsibility for policy implementation, quality assurance, regulation and oversight of the Eastern RHA, the Southwestern RHA, the North Central RHA, the Northwestern RHA, and the Tobago RHA. While it seems to be normal under this PNM government for persons to serve on 1, 2, or even 10 state boards, at the same time the question remains, are they doing the job the taxpayers are paying them to do? Because that is where the problem is, ladies and gentlemen. As cases continue to skyrocket and people continue to die in increasing numbers, it is obvious that the government's COVID management team, their pandemic response plan, and their public education plan have all failed miserably. What was needed 2 years ago and is still desperately needed now is a committed group of professionals dedicated exclusively to confronting the pandemic. People who would spend every waking moment researching best practices worldwide, strategizing, building response plans, and implementing them, and saving the lives of our citizens. Not this self-promoting political PR team. Not people who are so busy earning a dollar from running NIPDEC and Angostura that they treat the lives of our citizens in their spare time. We deserve better. What they are doing is not working. And we, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, are paying an astronomically high price for it. We have been in this pandemic for almost 2 years, and we still have 162 ICU beds for a population of 1.4 million people. That is the epitome of failure, especially since months ago this very same team was on record as saying that the ICU has almost maxed out, and that was when we had less than half the number of active cases that we have now. They did nothing to fix it. Tonight, I repeat the call by the Honorable Minister. I repeat the call by the Honorable Leader of the Opposition months ago, that if they can't do the job, they should be fired or remove themselves, or the minister himself should lead the pack and leave the government of Trinidad and Tobago. If this COVID-19 team was really interested in protecting citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, by now we would have had a real parallel healthcare system, fully resourced and fully equipped. Ironically, when the pandemic hit, this government already had in its hands a substantial part of the critical infrastructure necessary to confront the pandemic, handed to them on a silver platter by the vision of Kamla Prasad Bisesa. Hospitals, equipment and training facilities for medical and technical staff. In 2018, even as the RC was jumping on a plane to go to Cuba to source 250 specialist doctors, newspapers were reporting the high numbers of unemployed medical interns which existed in Trinidad and Tobago. So we had the equipment, we had the staff. What was required was the commitment to operationalize those items. Instead, the government split the health sector, creating a fake parallel system. If you are someone in line waiting for elective surgeries, cataract surgeries, radiation therapy, a CT scan, heart surgery, etc., you know that every time you go to the health center and every time you go to the hospital, you are being deferred months and months and months and time again. Same doctors, same nurses, same beds, same equipment. How is there a parallel healthcare system? Is it a parallel only in name, because that allows this government to bypass the procurement legislation which they themselves gutted? It allows them to sole select suppliers and to bypass the Central Tenders Board and the Office of the Procurement Regulator. That, my friends, is why the Honorable Leader of the Opposition has called for an audit of the expenditure which this government claims it has spent in the name of COVID. Ladies and gentlemen, according to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Colm Imbert himself, this government has already spent over $5 billion on what he called COVID relief as at August 15th, 2021. And this included the cost of vaccines, by the way. $5 billion, and we don't have 500 beds in the ICU. What has that money really been spent on, Mr. Imbert? We need to know. Because you see, ladies and gentlemen, according to the Minister of Health, the amount of money actually spent by the Ministry of Health to deal with COVID-19 specifically was $480 million. Yes, you heard me right. Since the start of the pandemic response in Trinidad and Tobago, Colm Imbert has been talking that he has spent over $5 billion, and less than $500 million was actually spent on the Ministry of Health, charged with the responsibility of providing health care and the safety of our citizens and a proper response to COVID-19. And mind you, that money was spent towards infrastructure, human resources, consumables including building and upgrading facilities, paying for quarantine, and buying equipment and personal protective equipment, PPE. So where has that other $4.5 billion and more gone? Well, the truth is that $3.8 billion was used to repay the VAT and tax refunds owed by the government to businesses and individuals. This had nothing to do with COVID. What it had to do with was a bad mind government forcing people to lend them money by holding their tax returns for ransom. That leaves, ladies and gentlemen, about $720 million that could conceivably have been spent on COVID relief, not $5 billion. And we already know that the Auditor General's report on government expenditure on COVID relief found multiple instances of discrepancies and questionable conduct. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, we are asking for a proper audit. If there's nothing to hide, why are they hiding? What is worse, ladies and gentlemen, the minister himself told the Parliament in October this year that the vast majority of small and medium-sized businesses had been unable to access any support promised in the last year's budget. After a year, he is still revising and reviewing the incentives and initiatives for these sectors, for these small and medium-sized businesses. These initiatives and these incentives were allegedly designed to keep these SMEs afloat during the pandemic. But the lack of planning and poor executing and misguided priorities by this government meant that SMEs in Trinidad and Tobago received very little or next to nothing from government during this COVID pandemic. The result? 6,000 plus SMEs went out of business. Many more downsized. Tens of thousands of persons lost their jobs and livelihoods because this government does not care. Those businesses are the forgotten people, forgotten by this negligent government. People are still reeling from the unemployment, from the first lockdown. And now the PNM says that he can't afford another lockdown. Well, we couldn't afford the first one. The state of the economy pre-COVID under Imbert set the stage for the economic pit that we now find ourselves in. The damage was already done by Imbert and his gang, and COVID has dealt the final blow. And instead of developing strategies to engage different sectors in COVID relief, recovery, and rebuilding, this government is creating a dependency syndrome by providing a bare minimum to citizens struggling to just get by. We are a proud nation, we are a proud people who work hard and build and strive. But under this government, all we are getting is strife. This deliberate PNM policy to push our citizens back into dependency is unacceptable. And it is a fundamental difference between the UNC and the PNM. Under the UNC, the economic environment existed to encourage people to invest in themselves, create their own business opportunities, generate revenue for themselves and via taxes to this government. That is what created economic growth and development such as we saw between 2010 and 2015. When this government assumed office in 2015, the value of your savings at the Heritage and Stabilization Fund was about $5.7 billion US dollars, or 37 billion TT dollars saved over the life of the fund. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, that in the last 2 years alone, this government has withdrawn $1.9 billion US dollars, or 12 billion TT dollars. That's 1/3 of the value that they found when they came into office. And the fact that this fund still has significant monies in it has nothing to do with Imbert and Rowley and that gang, because they never put a cent into it. It is only because of a track record of sound investments since its inception many years ago that the HSF continues to survive. But where has this $12 billion gone, Mr. Imbert? Because citizens are suffering. Not the UNC saying this. Last year, IDB advised the government and the world that by April 2020, the amount of people living on an income below the minimum wage had quadrupled. Worse, half the population were living in poverty as at April last year. More recent surveys point to an even more alarming statistic. In its June 2021 publication, the Caribbean COVID-19 Food Security and Livelihoods Impact Survey revealed that 8 out of 10 persons in the lowest income groups were jobless. On page 9 of the survey, a concerned 62-year-old man told us that his son and his wife had lost their business and he had been supporting them since the pandemic started, and that his savings had almost gone. On page 2, we are told of even more crises. On page 14, even more crises, ladies and gentlemen. Overall, we are told that 2 out of 10 persons admitted to skipping meals or eating less. What was worse is that figure doubled in the households with income below or well below average, with out of 10 persons, 4 going without food, without meals, many for more than a day. One 52-year-old man reported that he had difficulty paying rent and light and buying food, clothing, etc. "I am drained to dying," he said. This report found that many had resorted to selling assets to meet their basic food needs, sacrificing educational and future opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, the survey confirms something that we in the UNC have been telling this government for years. Too many of our citizens are in desperate and worsening conditions. But it also revealed another scary fact that citizens already know. 9 out of 10 citizens surviving at below or well below average income levels stated that they had received no government assistance during this COVID pandemic. And these, ladies and gentlemen, are the persons most desperately in need, and they got nothing from the government. These are the forgotten people, forgotten by this negligent government. And by the way, this is a government that has spent $4 billion every month since they assumed office. And yet so many citizens in this country are living in absolute poverty, having to do with food, without food. In this country, viewed as a high income level, high income country to the rest of the world, without food, without medical care, where have all these billions been spent? Poor people don't care about billions, They are struggling to get $1 to buy food. But we know that the billions lost means that these thousands upon thousands of citizens could not have to be suffering today. They should not have to be struggling to survive. And with the world warning of increased shortages and shipping costs, ladies and gentlemen, food prices are going to get even higher, pushing an already overburdened population further into depression and poverty. Before the pandemic, ladies and gentlemen, 80,000 children were assessed by this government as being desperately in need of food support in schools. These are children of persons usually at the lowest income levels, many of whom would have been the first ones to lose their livelihoods over the last 2 years. Ask yourself, what has been provided to these children over the last 22 months, ladies and gentlemen? How have they survived? These are the forgotten children. Do you think that these children, food before COVID, managed to get devices and Wi-Fi? No. They have been condemned to live a life of poverty and a future of poverty. The PNM has taken down this road by leveraging the future of our country. But the damage to our citizens' lives and livelihoods, as horrendous as it is, and it is. In addition to the withdrawal from the HSF I mentioned earlier, this government has borrowed from every possible source to prop up its mismanagement, corruption, and malfeasance. Today, central government debt is $106 billion, the highest it has ever been. What is worse is that this government has borrowed billions, but has made no investment in anything to generate money to repay this debt. So when these debts become due, as they will, how in the world will Trinidad and Tobago repay? Will we have to give away our ports, WASA, TSTT, state lands, our souls? This government has been borrowing on the backs of the working class, and at the same time, they have been undermining this very same group that they need to pay taxes. The obvious result, ladies and gentlemen, has been that government revenue has been getting less and less and less every year. The international agencies have noticed this, and that is why Moody's credit ratings and Standard & Poor's have consistently downgraded this country under Colin Imbert. Imbert is digging this country into a hole for our children to repay, while at the same time pauperizing their parents. We cannot continue to do business as usual, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot continue to hope for oil and gas prices to go up and for miraculously production to suddenly drastically skyrocket to pay this nation's daily bills or to pay the runaway debt that they have been running up. That model has not worked. We need transformation. Not diversification, transformation. And that's what COVID offered. An opportunity to do new things in new ways. That's what COVID offered us. An opportunity to do new things in new ways is how a government that is receptive would see it. Alas, not a single policy decision taken during this pandemic has been focused on this need to transform. If this government has been following the roadmap to recovery, then they must certainly be lost. With over $300 billion spent in the last 6 years and billions in loans and grant funding received from international agencies as a result of COVID, there's no reason why our healthcare should be so bad, why our roads and drainage should be so bad. There's no reason why we should have such astronomical crime rates. No reason why we should have so many people unemployed or so many more living in absolute poverty, not sure where they're going to get the next meal from. There's no reason why our citizens and our children should be without basic education, or our agricultural and manufacturing sectors should be in the crises that they are in now. But while we suffer, ladies and gentlemen, P&M friends, family and financiers continue to recuse themselves from the cabinet and laugh all the way to the banks. This must stop. The United National Congress, led by our political leader, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, has demonstrated in government and in opposition that we have the will and the capacity to bring growth and development to this country. Our leader has publicly detailed a national transformation plan well over a year ago. It is not too late. It is still viable. We can do this, ladies and gentlemen. We must do this, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I ask you to join us on December 12, 2021. Join the People's Revolution and let us send a loud, resounding message to this P&M government that we will have no more. We will not accept less than we are due. Ladies and gentlemen, stand up, stand proud. Join us, join the People's Revolution, and may God bless our nation. I thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Instinctively, you know you will save your child, but there is also a genetic reason for that. And the reason for that is that if you save your mother and you allow your child to drown, it means that you are going to affect the continuity of the human race. It's a very powerful lesson that we all need to understand.
In the image of the United National Congress, the Member of Parliament for Faizabad, Dr. Lakram Budu.
To those listening and viewing on our many platforms, I say a very good evening and welcome to the UNC Monday Night Virtual. I wish to acknowledge the political leader of the United National Congress and the leader of the opposition, the distinguished Kamla Persad-Bissessar, my other colleagues on this virtual platform, our UNC supporters and other well-wishers, together with the members of the media who have joined us here tonight. As I speak with you tonight, the COVID-19 pandemic continues to rage globally with just over 260 million cases and over 5 million deaths reported across the globe so far. A new variant of concern, Omicron, some pronounce Omicron, first diagnosed in South Africa, has been announced by the WHO. And of course, this is something that we need to take note of. In Trinidad and Tobago, as of yesterday, we recorded 2,115 deaths with 70,136 positive cases in total, including 10,477 active cases, according to the latest Ministry of Health bulletin as of yesterday. I want to take the opportunity to express my deepest condolences to all of those who have lost their lives in this pandemic, their loved ones, their friends, families, their communities. A newspaper headline a few days ago put Trinidad and Tobago's death rate per million population at the top of a table of many countries, and this remains very worrisome. The Delta variant seems to be very widespread amongst the population, with the threat of the latest variant of concern, Omicron, looming on the horizon. Cases of the Omicron variant have already been confirmed in the UK, Canada, and the Netherlands. As we know, KLM recently started flights from Port of Spain to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So again, this is something that we have to be wary of. Initial findings suggest that this variant may be more transmissible and has the potential to be resistant to current vaccines. But I just want to say that the jury is still out, and it is still early days in terms of the potential, good or otherwise, of this latest variant. Despite officially closed borders last year, we remember that the Brazilian variant easily entered our shores, and as we know, it did not take long for the Delta variant to reach here. With international travel, it is difficult to restrict and restrain highly transmissible viruses generally, but in our case, our porous borders does not help. The limited testing offered by this government from the very beginning of the pandemic has always put Trinidad and Tobago at a disadvantage in terms of knowing the true number of infected persons at any given point. The official figures given for the Delta variant in this country, I am certain, do not represent the actual number of cases in our communities, and testing for this strain is limited. Since we have to assume that the cases amongst us are much higher than official statistics show, and therefore we have to tailor our behavior and activities accordingly. The daily number of new positive cases has been averaging 500, with the daily number of deaths averaging around 25 in the past 7 days. Health facilities are stretched to breaking point. As at yesterday afternoon, 543 patients were in hospitals, and as we know, the parallel healthcare system for COVID-19 has been severely stretched to its limits. Medical, nursing, and other healthcare workers are completely stressed out. Last week, we witnessed the very dramatic but perhaps unfortunate incident of Mr. Ricardo Gulcharan, a nurse at the San Fernando General Hospital, and a union representative trying to highlight the issues in a very dramatic fashion that the nurses are facing by handcuffing himself to a post. We've also heard comments from Mr. E.D. Stewart, the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Registered Nurses Association, who has highlighted on several occasions the problem of nursing shortages in the ICU of the crews of our hospital. In May of this year, a team of highly experienced senior doctors were redeployed from the Couva Hospital without any proper explanation. Again, what appears to be arbitrary action that can affect the well-being and the lives of COVID patients. Patients' relatives are frequently being asked to buy certain medications outside of the hospital for their loved ones with the coronavirus. There are more instances of persons dying in the COVID tents of the hospitals before they can get an ICU bed. Again, very, very worrying situation. Because of these issues, many citizens are asking whether their loved ones are getting the best care in hospitals and the ICUs and the HDUs. They're asking whether the medical teams are provided with all required drugs and supplies. And at this point, I want to say a very special thank you to the very hard-working frontline medical team who go out of their way on a daily basis to do their very best with what they are provided. People are asking, why is it that patients who are awaiting testing and are having to wait for long hours in the same tents with known COVID positive patients? So again, where is the increase in testing? Why are there not drive-through testing facilities which can be more expeditious and safer? Is there a shortage of testing kits at certain health facilities? Yesterday I received a phone call from one of my constituents that they, being a contact, was told that there was a shortage at the Sipara District Health Facility. So what is the government hiding? The earlier statistics suggested that the majority of patients who died from COVID-19 were elderly and had no comorbidities. That is changing. We are seeing deaths in younger persons, including, unfortunately, a 7-year-old boy recently. We are also seeing deaths in those with no comorbidities. We are seeing deaths even in some persons who were fully vaccinated. We are undoubtedly dealing with a more deadly variant of COVID-19, which appears to have gone wild in a population that is only 45% fully vaccinated, and we seem to have been stuck at that figure. The government needs to step up its game on all fronts if we are to decrease deaths and get to a better place sooner. A way must be found to get those who are yet unvaccinated to take a vaccine. They just cannot throw their arms up in the air and give up, as they seem to have done with regards to the vaccination problem. I urge the Minister of Health to reach out in more meaningful ways to engage communities and groups who are not yet vaccinated to do so. But those who are already vaccinated need to be protected from breakthrough infections and possible death. And this is a very important issue in this country, because we've seen some deaths in fully vaccinated individuals. We as a sovereign nation can make our own decisions regarding treatments and measures that would most benefit our own population according to our own circumstances. Whilst adherence to WHO recommendations are important, and I agree that WHO has an important role to play, but we must remember that the WHO represents 192 countries, and therefore Trinidad and Tobago has to look at its own situation. We know that the FDA and the CDC in the USA and the MHRA, which is the UK Healthcare Regulatory Agency, have taken decisions to protect their populations outside of WHO guidelines in a more timely manner. At the Ministry's press conference this morning, the Minister of Health finally announced that a booster program is coming for those persons already vaccinated. This is after more than 50 countries have already introduced a booster program, and after repeated calls by the opposition for this measure to be implemented, including recent calls by my colleague, the Member of Parliament for Caroni East, and former MP, Dr. Tim Gopi Singh. I was hoping that the Minister would have announced to move ahead without waiting for WHO approval in this regard. He needs to do it more expeditiously if we are to save more lives. Tonight, appropriate booster shots now. There is no reason why this cannot be done as a matter of urgency. These doctors and nurses are experiencing enough daily stress to have to worry about when they will get this additional protection. And they are worried, they are stressed, they are on the front line. They deserve this extra layer of protection of the booster shot right now. In addition, I call upon the Minister of Health and the government to offer all other frontline workers an appropriate booster shot. I also call upon the Minister of Health and the government to expand immediately the category of persons in the general population who can receive the additional primary doses. Again, these are measures which can be implemented very, very quickly. Many people with comorbidities who took their first course of vaccines are now eagerly and anxiously looking forward to this further layer of protection against the coronavirus. Many of them have already visited the vaccination centers only to be turned away and tell them that they have to wait their turn. This is not acceptable in a situation where the virus is rampant and spreading quickly. I want to speak of another intervention that could be of great benefit in our situation, and that is the use of the oral antiviral drugs recently developed by Merck and Pfizer to fight COVID-19. I urge the government to ensure that these drugs are made available to the population as soon as they get the necessary approvals, and not drop the ball as they did in the early stages of vaccine procurement. Because these drugs can be given orally outside of a hospital setting, many more patients can avoid hospitalization and many more lives can be saved if the government stays ahead of this particular game. Another casualty of the COVID-19 pandemic in this country under this PNM government is the regular healthcare system, the collapse of the regular healthcare system. The government early on boasted of a parallel healthcare system to fight the pandemic, meaning that the regular healthcare system would be separate and function as normal. This is what the population was told, that you have two health systems, one to fight COVID-19 and one to maintain the normal activity. This never happened in any meaningful way because of inadequate planning and the failure of the government to engage additional staff despite separate budgetary allocations to fight COVID-19. The cornerstone of this parallel healthcare system was, of course, the Couva Hospital, a 230 bed state-of-the-art facility left to the nation in 2015 by the People's Partnership Government under the visionary leadership of then Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. What this government has been doing is splitting critical staff between the regular healthcare system and the parallel healthcare system. They employed very little additional clinical staff for the parallel healthcare system. In fact, what has been happening is that they've redeployed the same anesthetists who work, for example, at the San Fernando Hospital, 2.14, and the Augustus Long Hospital. And of course, this is creating a problem in the regular healthcare system. As a result, many of you have had your much-needed surgeries postponed. The waiting list is growing even longer with the overwhelming of the regular healthcare accident and emergency departments with COVID-19 cases. Waiting times for clinics have increased. Non-COVID patients with chronic disease such as diabetes, heart and kidney conditions are getting more sick, and there seems to be an increase in deaths amongst the group of persons. And I think this is something that is, that has not been recognized. Whilst we are busy talking about COVID-19 deaths, very quietly, you have those patients with chronic illnesses, who because of lack of care or inadequate care are also losing their lives. To add insult to injury, I am very reliably informed that a number of senior and experienced specialists at the SWRHA were sent on long leave, in some instances up to 1 year, recently. This at a time when their services are more needed than ever to alleviate patients' suffering. I invite the Minister to investigate this situation and ask the SWRHA to reconsider this decision at this time. I call upon the government to look at more innovative ways to treat with this backlog of surgeries and sick non-COVID patients so that we don't end up with a much sicker population when this pandemic is eventually tamed, as it will be. Engage spare capacity in the health sector, in the private sector if necessary, if you have to ensure that the backlog for surgeries does not become overburdening. Engage the hundreds of unemployed doctors to help to treat with those patients with chronic disease. Ladies and gentlemen, a couple of Saturdays ago, I saw a headline in the Trinidad Guardian. I believe it was 2 Saturdays ago. It was titled, "I am deadly afraid." And it struck me, it really was inappropriate for such a headline to be attributed to the Minister of Health. And the subheading was this, and I quote, "Impending end of SOE troubles the Alsing." The question is, why was he afraid? Was it because he finally realized that under his stewardship, the country was not ready for the Delta variant? So why was he afraid? Was it because the SOE did not really make an impact on this pandemic? I call upon the minister and advise the minister, and I want to tell the minister, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to provide resources to overworked doctors and nurses. Do not be afraid to make testing more widespread and more available. Do not be afraid to close the loopholes in the home isolation, contact tracing, and state-supervised home quarantine system. Do not be afraid to take the vaccination drive to a more acceptable. But Minister, if you feel you cannot do the job, do not be afraid to do the honorable thing. As I close, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I want to advise you to continue to stay safe by observing the 3 W's. Wash your hands, wear your mask, watch your distance. But I want to appeal to you to arm yourself with that additional layer of protection by taking a vaccine. Seek proper information from doctors, nurses, and other healthcare experts. Nobody is going to plant a chip in you with a vaccine. Ignore the naysayers and the social media doom and gloom anti-vaxxers. Take the vaccine to protect yourself, your family, your communities. Get your children vaccinated where appropriate. Pregnant women will benefit from vaccination, and we should encourage them to get vaccinated. It will require all of us working together to take us out of this pandemic. May God continue to bless the United National Congress, and may God continue to bless our great nation. I thank you.
You know why we are in this position? Because when you cut gates and you fire people and you close down businesses, that is what will cause the crime situation to go up. When you don't give persons opportunities, when you take away the opportunities from them.
In the image of the United National Congress, the Member of Parliament for Barataria San Juan, Mr. Saddam Hussein.
Good evening, Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening, UNC family. Thank you for joining us on another Monday night virtual report. I want to commend the speakers that came before me for their very hard-hitting and insightful presentations. I want to say a special good night to our political leader, Mrs. Kamala Prasad-Bissessar of Senior Council. And as I begin tonight, I also want to acknowledge a true patriot and champion of the United National Congress, Mr. Victor Roberts. Mr. Roberts is currently conducting a peaceful, dramatic protest through Trinidad, walking from his home in Libre to Port of Spain. And this march is to highlight the dictator Rowley's attack on our democratic institutions and the thousands of lives and livelihoods that he is destroying. And if you have tuned into the live stream of Victor's walks, so far you would have seen him walking while pushing a coffin. And that coffin is where the PNM is putting our democracy. But thanks to the true patriots like Victor Roberts, Dictator Rowley has a fight on his hands. On Saturday, as Victor was passing through Pinal, the political leader went out to greet him and lent her support. She was very proud of Victor for his efforts. And I urge all of you to keep an eye out for him. If you see him walking in your area, show him your love and your support. We in the United National Congress congratulate him. And we must all join and do our part in order to ensure this wicked dictator Keith Rowley doesn't destroy our proud democracy of Trinidad and Tobago. So Victor, Godspeed, go brave my brother. We will win this fight together. Today, we are in a very dangerous place with regards to this COVID pandemic. Dictator Rowley does not care and he has never cared. This is why we are in this position today. Now I urge everyone to follow the health protocols, wash your hands, social distance. Please consult with your doctor and get vaccinated if you can. We all have our responsibility for our own health. But there are more than that as well. The government has a responsibility for public health, to maintain our hospitals, to ensure that we have proper staff and training, proper and sufficient supplies of drugs and equipment to improve the health administration. All this dictator Rowley has failed to do, and he refuses to be held accountable by our democratic systems. The government has failed to look after public health, because what dictator Rowley, Faris Alarental, recusal Twin Stewart, credit card Camille, tax break Imbert, greedy Rohan, and the rest of their gang, now including State Board Abdul Richards, they are only concerned with grabbing as much as they can for themselves and their families, friends, and financiers. This COVID disaster is what their greed and lawlessness has produced. And when we read the statistics, our heart drops. We are saddened, and then we get angry as well, knowing that possibly hundreds of these deaths were totally unnecessary. Totally unnecessary. The COVID death toll is now over a frightening 2,000 persons in Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago now ranks what? Number 1 in the world for daily new confirmed 19 COVID deaths per million people, a 7-day rolling average. And this data was compared by international bodies on the website Our World in Data. And this is what we have to face under this Rowley administration. And what this means is that the state of emergency was a total failure. It resulted in more deaths than any other country in the world has experienced. And if we use the Prime Minister's logic, well, that after the SOE, there will be more movement, which will lead to more infections. Well, why didn't you increase the number of ICU beds? After spending billions of dollars, we are not in any better place. It was a shame to see patients in flood under a tent in Port of Spain after billions of dollars have been spent. According to the Oxford University, our rate is 17.81 deaths per million persons. And the UK is 0.75 deaths per million people. The US is 0.31 deaths. Italy is 0.78 deaths. Canada is 0.13 deaths. India is 0 deaths. Trinidad and Tobago is, and I repeat, 17.81 deaths per million people in a 7-day rolling average. That's 137 times the death rate in Canada, an infinite amount greater than India, and 22.8 times that of Italy. We all remember what Italy was facing during the beginning of this pandemic. And this is not the fault of the people. This is the fault of our health system under this Keith Rowley administration. We are dying at a faster rate in Trinidad and Tobago, not because the virus is more deadly here. It is dictator Rowley and his failed health team that are more deadly. Dictator Rowley and the PNM is the real pandemic. Their mismanagement of the ICU and HDU units with their incompetent political appointee, Davlin Thomas, at the head, has made checking into Rowley's parallel healthcare system almost the same thing as a death sentence. Davlin is a mass man, and he is making mass in the NCRHA. Tonight, I echo the call of the honorable political leader who has proven 100% right about Rowley's propaganda team, the CMO and the failed health team. They must be removed now, and we must include that Terence Dialsing must also go, because he is the minister in charge of the health administration of Trinidad and Tobago. They must be replaced by teams of competent, senior, experienced medical, nursing, and intersectoral leaders with a multiplicity of talents, skills, and management knowledge. When our Honorable Leader Kamla Prasad Bisesa first called for the removal of this incompetent, clinically inexperienced team, there were fewer than 200 deaths. Today, we are at over 2,000 deaths. And we see the principal medical officer taking up government appointments left, right, and center at multiple state agencies. Agencies that are appointed by this PNM government. Agencies that are packed and used as rewards for PNM loyalty. Now this brings me to Rowley's televised history address to the nation last week. What a dismal failure and anticlimax that was. In fact, it was an insult to every man, woman, and child in this country, a total waste of time. And instead of providing hope to our stressed and worried people, Dictator Rowley, looking and speaking like a zombie, rambled aimlessly on a long-winded attempt to excuse himself for this mess he has made. Some spin doctors in the PNM say that this is a history lesson. Not at all. History deals with facts. What Dictator Rowley delivered was pure propaganda, which they hope to turn to PNM mythology. Well, I want to give a history lesson here tonight. It is a timeline of facts of Dictator Rowley's COVID incompetence. Tonight I want to remind Keith Rowley that since January of 2020, when the novel coronavirus was declared an infectious, dangerous disease, the UNC immediately called for the threat of COVID-19 to be debated in the Parliament. 5 times, in fact, 5 times, and they were all dismissed. Every time it was shut down and dismissed by the PNM. It was not an important, it was not an urgent, and it was not a definite matter for them. In fact, Wante Diyal Singh went on television and laughed when asked if COVID posed a threat to our shores. Well, today he is weeping. When MP Lakram Bodo, who spoke earlier on, asked the chief medical officer if he would if Carnival would continue despite the potential spread of COVID-19, the CMO laughed and dismissed the idea that COVID-19 could threaten us. Well, look at where we are today. 2,000 deaths. I want to remind Rowley that it was Mrs. Kamla Prasad Bisesa who had to resort to writing to the government of India to ask for free life-saving vaccines for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And tonight we congratulate her. When the government had failed to secure any and none were coming on the horizon, at the same time, our Caribbean neighbors were getting these donations. And for doing that, Dictator Rowley and his PNM supporters in the media and elsewhere attacked Mrs. Prasad Bisesa for that, for asking for life-saving vaccines for our people. Can you imagine that? They were casting doubt on the AstraZeneca vaccines from India. Remember that. That's where the vaccine hesitancy started. At the same time, Dictator Rowley said Kamla Prasad Bisesa was begging and that he would never lower himself to be a beggar for vaccines. Remember, he refused the offer of our businessmen to bring in vaccines. And again, he cast doubt on the validity of those vaccines. Dictator Rowley never wanted us to get those vaccines quickly. He was concerned about his friends, his family, and his financiers. We were 5 months behind the rest of the world with regards to vaccination, and we were one of the least vaccinated countries in the world under Keith Rowley. And instead of allowing the free media to do their job, Dictator Rowley ensured that the health briefings were a political PNM platform. They were never meant to tell the population the truth about this pandemic. Crucial information was never given or available. Paid PNM bloggers were inserted into COVID-19 health briefings to ask questions. You know why? To make the government look good. And on the other hand, real journalists were verbally abused and attacked, and they were even banned from attending. At the same time, dictator Rowley invited people to travel to Tobago for Easter. You know, he was saying Tobago was the place to be for Easter. His partner Rohan boasted that 50,000 people went to Tobago and Trinidad. They used the air bridge. That reckless action resulted in the biggest spike Tobago has ever seen to date, and it continues until today. And like all dictators, Rowley wants to rewrite history, but he will fail. When the history of COVID-19 pandemic is written, it will tell the story of a dictator who caused his country to have the highest COVID-19 death rate in the world. Our leader, Mrs. Kamala Persad-Bissessar, has called for a commission of inquiry into this disastrous COVID-19 response. And the healthcare team must be in other countries. High officials have had to step down. This is why Dictator Rowley is afraid of a proper functioning parliamentary democracy. Dictator Rowley isn't just destroying lives, he is destroying livelihoods. This started well before COVID, but it has now become infinitely worse. This dictatorial PNM government has spent $5 billion in COVID-19 relief, but it simply refuses to account for it. Where did that $5 billion go? You will remember the IMF gifted this country nearly 3 billion TT dollars to use for COVID-19 relief. Where has that money gone? So Rowley and the PNM spent over $5 billion supposedly to help people during COVID. I ask you tonight, have you received a single cent out of this $5 billion? And the PNM are busy threatening citizens with property tax and criminalizing those who do not submit their valuation forms. But they cannot tonight tell us where the $5 billion has disappeared. And about the valuation forms, I want to tell you that we stand against the property tax. And we have fought in the courts and we have fought in the parliament. But however, as things stand, you can't be charged for not filling out your form. Therefore, we cannot advise you at this time to get criminally charged or fined. Tonight, I'm appealing to this PNM government to do the decent thing. Now is the worst time to punish citizens with property tax. We learned that an extension to submit the evaluation return forms would be extended to January 2022. This is another failed attempt by the PNM to tax the population. At this time, they cannot get 50% of the population to complete the evaluation return forms. So therefore, the tax would be applied inequitably. So I say, and the UNC says, revoke this dreadful property tax, not extend the deadline date that will rob persons of what little money they have left. Please think about our people and stop this dreadful tax now. Lives and livelihoods are one and the same both. And tonight, there's a very important issue, and I ask you to pay careful attention to this issue that I'm going to raise. A couple of weeks ago, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, the opposition leader, held up some files on this very platform and promised to reveal what those files will contain. Tonight I want to share with you that information. Now there's a company called Inez Investments Limited. Inez Investment owns a development on Shervan Road in Tobago, which was developed with townhouses. And according to Inez Investment's website, there are 46 townhouses in a development called Inez Gate. And as at March 2021, the beneficial owners of Inez Investments Limited are 1. Miriam Dillon Fordringham, sister of the lone independent senator that voted with the government to gut the procurement law. 2. Kian Warner. 3. Kalana Warner. And 4. Kai Townsend. Some of the beneficial owners are business associates and in other interrelated companies with Mr. Alan Warner, a very close friend of the Prime Minister. And based on the deeds that we have in our possession, this development has attracted some very prominent purchasers. Some of the persons who have purchased these townhouses are persons such as Newman George, director on several state boards and husband of the Speaker of the House; Alvin Hilaire, governor of the Central Bank; Ingrid Lashley, director on several state enterprises; Mr. Gilbert Peterson of Senior Counsel, beneficiary of a bunkering contract to sell fuel in the Gulf of Paria; Mr. Alan Warner, a related business owner and friend of the Prime Minister; Keith Rowley and Sharon Clark Rowley, Prime Minister and his wife; and Sonal Rowley, the daughter of the Prime Minister. So these are the purchasers of some of the townhouses. And the development has many prominent P&M purchasers. And one may ask why we are raising concerns relating to this development. Well, the answer is twofold. Firstly, we will examine the purchase price of the townhouse to the various persons who have purchased. And two, there are matters relating to breaches of the Integrity in Public Life Act. And on the first issue, we will compare the prices paid by the other buyers as compared to the Prime Minister. Several of the purchasers that I called out early on of the townhouses paid between 1.6 million and 1.8 million for a unit. So the average price for a unit is about $1.7 million. Now, there are some persons who paid 1.6 on the lower end, and these persons were persons such as the governor of the central bank, Mr. Newman George, Ingrid Lashley, Mr. Gilbert Peterson, and Mr. Warner himself. Now, there are those who paid $1.8 million, such as the Rampersads, the St. Rose, the Camino, and the Derricks. And we have all of the deeds in our possession of all of the persons who have purchased townhouses as listed above. So let's have a look at the Rowleys, Keith Rowley and Sharon Clark Rowley. From the deeds we have in our possession, the Prime Minister and his wife got a hefty discount on their townhouse unit. Now, while everyone else seemed to be paying between 1.6 million to 1.8 million for their unit, the Prime Minister, according to deed dated 21st of February 2019, paid $1.2 million for his unit. So the Prime Minister got a discount of a whopping $0.5 million off of his townhouse. $500,000 he got off. And when you buy a property and you purchase property, you have to pay something called stamp duty. So when you look at the stamp duty amount that is found on the deed, it covers that particular property for the actual value of what the property is and not what you actually pay for it. So the stamp duty on this particular property that the Prime Minister bought is valued at $1.68 million. But remember, the Prime Minister paid $1.2 million for it. Now, when the Prime Minister unit was compared with the other units from the other purchasers, the size of all of the units were relatively the same, and this is found at the schedule at the back of the deeds. Well, it doesn't end there. Sonal Rowley, the daughter of the Prime Minister, also purchased a unit at Inez Gate on the 5th of August 2021. But she purchased not from Inez Investment. She purchased from the Prime Minister's friend, Mr. Alan Warner. And she paid, just like the Prime Minister, $1.2 million for her unit. However, what is strange about the transaction is Mr. Alan Warner's transaction. Before he sold the unit to Ms. Sonal Rowley, he purchased the unit from Inez Investment for $1.6 million and then sold it to Ms. Rowley for $1.2 million, a discount of $0.4 million. So when you add the Prime Minister's discount of 0.4, it's about 0.9 million, approximately $1 million they got off on these units. Now, one would ask, why would a businessman buy a property and sell it at a loss? So those are the questions that we would like answered. Now, this doesn't stop there, because under the law, which the Attorney General is very unfamiliar with, any member of the public can access records at the Integrity Commission. People in public life every year must file their assets and their liabilities with the Integrity Commission. Remember when Mr. Pandey was charged for his failure to declare a London bank account? So the same occurs here. As of last week, checks were done at the Integrity Commission, and it was revealed that the Prime Minister failed to declare that he purchased the townhouse from Inez Investments. Very strange. He purchased this unit since February 2019. Now this is in violation of the law because the Prime Minister did not declare that he owns the townhouse. When we checked the other names, Ingrid Lashley, Newman George and Mr. Alvin Hilaire, they all declared their unit with the Integrity Commission. So Prime Minister, why are you hiding? You have broken the law. Under Section 27 of the Integrity in Public Life Act, it states that where a gift or personal benefit referred to in subsection 2 of the section exceeds $5,000 in value, or where the total value received directly or indirectly from one source in any 12-month period exceeds $5,000, a person in public life, like the Prime Minister, shall file with his declaration a statement indicating the nature of the gift or benefit, its source, and the circumstances under which it was given or accepted. So this simply means if a person in public life, like the Prime Minister, receives a gift or personal benefit that exceeds $5,000, they must declare that with the Integrity Commission. It is clear on the face of the deed that the Prime Minister received a personal benefit from Inez Investment of $0.5 million, a company affiliated with his friend Mr. Alan Warner. Now the Prime Minister didn't declare his ownership of the property to the Integrity Commission, neither did he declare that he got a discount of $0.5 million. Now this is a matter that warrants urgent action by the Integrity Commission because we are seeing breaches of the various sections of the INTI in Public Life Act. So tonight we call upon the Prime Minister to please answer these questions and clear the air on this Inez Investments, Inez Gate scandal. Now, in addition to the Prime Minister upcoming loss in Tobago, he is due for another one here in Trinidad, but he is desperately trying to avoid it. After the People's Revolution protested and put pressure on the government, Rowley announced that he will call the elections in Debe South soon. Debe South has been without a representative for almost a year. Rowley, you called 2 elections in Tobago because you lost. Why are you spitting at the people of Debe South? Call the elections now. So in conclusions, my brothers and sisters, we are facing dark times, but we are facing it with strength, hope, and determination. All across our nation, peaceful People's Revolution continues. Remember, our People's Revolution drive-in rally will be held on the 12th of December. We will announce more details in the weeks ahead. In these dark times, remember that we love you in the UNC. I love this country. I love our people. We will get through this together. We will continue to stand up together. Stay safe. Stay blessed. Have a good night.
The voice of the people is the voice of God. The tables are turning, your eyes are opening. Welcome to the revolution. People crying out for justice.
Some of them crying out for freedom.
Want freedom. Everybody together as one. This revolution is about restoring our democracy. And this revolution is about stopping this creeping dictatorship. This is the people's revolution.